Hello and welcome to this Affinity photo tutorial, and this is a beginner's guide part 7. We are going to be looking at mainly at the select menu, which is found up here along this menu list, and you can click on that and it will do a drop down menu. Now before I go on with that, I just want to say that I'm working with two images from pixabay.com, this sort of colourful oil painting daubed image, and this girl holding a camera. Now before I sort of really get onto the select menu, we really need to look at select, on making selections. Now there are three main selection tool areas, which is the selection brush tool, flood select tool, and here in the marquee menu, which will drop down, you have all of these shaped selection tools, and you do also have the freehand selection tool. You can also make selections from the pen tool, like I discussed in part 6, because when you select that tool, once you've made and selected an area, you can come up here and make a selection of it. So just a quick sort of demonstration using the elliptical marquee tool. I'll just draw out a circle, and once you've made sort of a selected area, you'll have these like black and white dots going around the outside, commonly known sort of like as marching ants. So this area on the inside is the area that is being selected. Now with all the selection tools you get this refine button, because if I click on one of the others, you can see that that refine button stays as it is. So currently this selection, obviously being round, is also sort of a hard edge to this, and to prove this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplication of this selection area. So, and to do that, you can come up to the layer menu, and we got down here duplicate selection, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of Control and J on a PC, Command and J on a Mac. So I click on that, and if I turn off the background, you can see, and to remove this selection area from the select menu, you can use Deselect or Control and D. Now I'm going to be using Control and D quite often to deselect the selection area. So if I come up to the move tool, as you can see, this is now a layer in its own right. I can move it around, and I can sort of rotate it, twist it, and I can even resize it if I want to. So if I turn the background area back on, as you can see, it's hardly visible now amongst all the other sort of paint daubs. So let me delete that one, if it will let me. It's not gonna, here we go, delete. And I'll make a similar selection again, like that. But this time I will use the refine option, and when you use the refine option, it will show all the areas that aren't selected will have this sort of red tint to it, and the area that is selected will just look fairly normal. So as you can see, this sort of edge is sort of quite hard to give us that sort of nice crisp circle, but you can feather that selection, and the higher you move the feather slider, it will sort of transition from the hard selected area to a much softer selected area, so you get a sort of a very soft transition between. So if I sort of put this to about halfway, hopefully you can see that that edge is now a little bit more blurred, and I will move this up quite high, and as you can see that area, or edge I should say, is much more softer transition. So you can also sort of smooth that area, and there are other options in here which I won't go into at the moment because that's more sort of, you know, more advanced, let's say, and not really sort of necessary to look at in this video. Now you can output this, what we've refined in here. If you use selection, it will just put it back to having the marching ants, but you know, altered to how you've made any changes. Or you can have it come out as a layer mask, so that layer mask will be added to the layer that is selected. Or you can have it put on a new layer, so that would be like using Control and J, or you can have a new layer with a mask on it. So I'm just going to use new layer and then apply, and what that does, it will put that on the new layer. It will turn off the original layer, so you just get this selected area only. But as you can see, because I refined it, those edges are not so harsh, and you've got this sort of much more sort of smoothing out. So it's even harder to tell now where that has been. Even if I move it, because of those refined edges, it's very hard to see this now, whereas when I had the selection with very hard edges, it was a lot easier to spot where that selection was. So that is like the use of the refine tool. So let me just delete this. Now another reason why you might want to make a selection other than making a new layer is if I use that same selection method again, and I'll make this circle. I won't bother to refine it this time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an adjustment. And when you add an adjustment, when there is an area selected, it will take that area that is selected and it will alter the layer mask that is on the adjustment. So I'm just going to pick levels, and I can now deselect this area. So I use Control and D, and once I've deselected, you can see that the icon has now got that white circle, and this has now got the layer mask altered by that selection. So any alterations I make now will only affect the area that was selected. So if I make this darker, and then you can see that only the area that was selected has been changed. So that is another reason why you might want to make a selection to alter an adjustment's layer mask in a specific area. And let me just delete that. There's another use for selection. Now probably the main use for using a selection is to sort of cut out an object to move from one picture onto another. So if I want this picture of this girl with the camera to be on this background, but obviously I don't want all this white here, I just want the girl. Now this is where using things like the selection brush tool, whereas you can sort of click on an area and select it. So you could, for example, hang on, let me delete that. I think that's from my previous practice. Where is it? Why isn't this selected? Oh, there we go. So you can make a selection of the girl or whatever it is that you are trying to use, And this tool is, it's very basic. But it is also very good. So some subject like this, especially when you've got a nice clean background like this white background I've got here, it will be pretty good at making a selection. The difficulty may come if this picture was taken when she was in a grassy forest or something like this. It would be much harder to make the selection, and you might have to find another tool to make the selection, be it like the freehand selection tool using polygon mode, or even the pen tool. But for this, it's okay. Now this is where sort of using the refine option will come into play, because obviously you've got sort of strands of hair here, and to do this, if you click on the refine option, as you can see, it's made a pretty good selection, because all the red area is now pretty much going right around the outside of it and not affecting anything else except for her hair. As you can see, some of these strands of hair have got red on them. Now this is where, as you can see, this icon, the cursor has gone into a circle, which means it is a brush, and much like any other brush, you can increase the size and raise the size using the left and right square brackets. So if you paint on the edge of a hair and then let go and let the program have a little think about it, it will then try and select these stray hairs as best it can. So I'll just come around here like this and do a hair. You might have to go over it a couple of times, and again, because this has got a nice clean background, it will do a better job than if like she was in a forest or something like that. You do have to wait for the program to finish its last go before you start another go, otherwise it will give you that little annoying noise. So I think that will do for now. So much like before, I'm going to output this as a new layer and click apply, and like before, it has turned off the original background and highlighted the layer that it has just made. And as you can see, we've got pretty much all of the hairs there, so that's a pretty good selection. Now all you need to do now is sort of copy this over to the other image, but I won't do that just yet. I'm going to come back to this area here, this image I should say, and we'll start to take a look at the select menu. So the first option in the select menu is select all. Now this is, in my opinion, slightly a sort of an outdated option, but I can't see that you're going to use this a great deal, because if you select all, especially, and you can use the keyboard shortcut of Control A or Command and A. If you select all, it will select the whole layer, which is sort of back when sort of the early days of photo editing, you had to select everything, then you had to copy, and then you had to paste, so there's 3 different options to do a certain job. If I deselect that now, but you can just right click this layer and do copy, and that has cut out the select all option and gone straight to copy, and then you can then do the paste option. So that does sort of make the select all option defunct, but you can sort of like, even on this area, this image here, if I did select all on this, it is going to select everything, be it the girl and the blank background. So there must be a good use of select all, but for the most part I can't see a good reason for it. The next one is deselect, which I would discuss previously, which is like using a Control and D to stop having a selection area. But if I then come down to reselect, it will reselect what has previously been selected. Similarly, if I press Control and D to get rid of that, if you are on a layer and you hold down the Control key, and I'm guessing Command on a Mac, and click on the icon for that layer, it will make a selection area of that layer. In this case it's just selecting the girl, not the background, but if I'd done it on this image it would have selected all of it. So I'll press Control and D to lose that selection area. Let me come off this tool a second. And the next one is invert the pixel selection. Now if I hide this girl image layer and highlight the original one, when I made that selection previously, I selected the girl, but this time I'm going to select the white area, and because there's a large white area here I can pretty much sort of go quite quickly and make a quick selection, and then I'll do a quick refine and get the hair area. And I think this will be the last bit, I think. And then I'll keep this as a selection and just click apply. Now because I've selected the white area, but it is the girl that I would have wanted, you can then come up to the select menu and invert that pixel selection, and now it is the girl that is selected and not the white area, which I did originally because it was easier to select the white area because it's such a large mass of it. And then I can use Control and J and then press Control and D to get rid of the selection area, and it has made a selection of that girl. So you can do it either by selecting the background and inverting it, or selecting the item that you want and work either way. So let's come back to the next option, which is a selection from layer. Now this is the layer that is highlighted. If I select from layer, it will select everything that was in that layer. So in this case it was just select the girl with the camera. If I'd used that image, it would have selected all of it. But it's pretty similar to having held down the Control key and clicked on the icon. You will get the similar result. Delete. Now this next option, I'm not sure when you would sort of ever use it. There must be a reason why you might use it, but you can do select from layer and delete. And if I click on that now, it has made a selection of the girl, but it has also deleted all the pixels from that girl. I suppose it might be useful for making a layer mask or something like that, but I'm not really 100% certain. So I'll press Ctrl and Z to undo that, and we'll have a look at the next option. And then we have save selection. Now you can save as a spare channel or save to a file. Now this is nothing I've ever really done or ever really looked into, but according to the help files, you can save pixel selections for later use in the current project or future projects, and it's useful to be able to reinstate more complex selections at any time and stage in your project. And then it tells you, how you can do that. So that is probably a more advanced stuff. Like I said, I've never really used it, and I can't fully see when I would ever need it. And below that one you can load, so if you have saved as a selection as a file, you can reinstate that file for a future project. But I can't see many people using that, and I guess I'm going to get a load of comments from people saying they use this all the time, but I personally can't see a lot of use for that. So let me just turn on these layers here so they are all available, and the next option in the select menu is select all layers, and if I click on that, as you can see, it has only selected the top two, not the bottom one. Now this did confuse me for a little while, but if I take that padlock off and then do select all layers, it will select the background layer as well. So obviously that padlock is stopping this from being selected. So let me put that padlock on, not that one, onto this one. So this is sort of a quick way of selecting all the layers, other than sort of holding down the control key and selecting them one at a time like that. And if you have selected like all the layers, the next option is deselect layers, so it will deselect all the layers, so you'd have to click on one to get that to work. Now the next options, probably best used this picture here for these next options. You can make selections of different ranges. The first option is the color range, so you can select reds, so it will select sort of all the red pixels in the image, but you do not have any sort of control over the tolerance of the red pixels being selected. Similarly, you obviously got greens and blue, I think it is, blue. So again, I'm not 100% certain why you would use something like this. I mean, obviously you've got the blue selected, and you could then add an adjustment and say levels, and then deselect, and then if I alter this, it will just affect the blues that were selected, the areas that were selected using this adjustment. But I can't see a vast usage for that particular option, or really the tonal range, which is working with midtones, shadows and highlights. For example, if you had a picture that had a lot of shadows in it, you could select the shadows and then come up to, say, the levels and make those shadows a bit lighter or a bit darker. Let's deselect first. It won't let me do anything until I've deselected. But yeah, you could make alterations this way just using midtones or shadows or highlights. The next range is alpha range. Now let's come back to this image for this, and I'll turn off the background, turn off this one. So we just now have the girl with the transparent background, and the selection is alpha range, so you can select fully transparent. So if I click on this one, it is selecting just the transparent areas of this image. And the next option is, where is it? There we go, partially transparent. So it's obviously it's doing the fully transparent area and the areas that are partially transparent. And the last one is opaque, which is sort of fairly similar to the partially transparent option. Again, I'm not 100% certain why you would use these options, but I'm sure there are people out there that are. So let me deselect that, and I think I need to come back to this image for the next option, which is select sampled color. Now if I click on this, it will just start off on, I think it was the last color that I chose, but as you can see the cursor has changed to this sort of target. So if you click on a color, it will make a selection of the area that you selected. Now this time you do have some control over the tolerance. So if I lower the tolerance, it will only select the areas of color that were closest to what I clicked on. And the higher the tolerance you get, it will allow colors that were close to what I selected, and the higher you raise this, the more it will let similar looking colors sort of be selected as well. So I selected an orange, and now it's allowing some reds to be selected, and the higher I push this, the more reds and darker reds it will select. So again, that is another way you can do this, and once you click apply, that will be the area that was selected, and you can then add sort of an adjustment, then press Ctrl and D, and then you can then start making alterations. So I could make those reds redder by using vibrance or saturation. So that is the select sampled color. Now these last options down here, which are currently grayed out mainly because I have no selection made, are pretty much the same options that were in the refine. So again, if I make a selection here now of a circle, those options are now not grayed out. So if I select feather, you'll just get a feather slider, and you can feather that selection however you want. Click apply, but I personally think it's a lot easier to go straight to the refine button, and it will then give you all of those same options and a bit more besides than just going to the select menu and just picking, you know, grow or shrink or feather, smooth. So you've got feather and smooth, which are in here. I'm not 100% certain what outline does, but refine edges must do what it says. It's probably pretty similar to smooth. Grow and shrink I think is pretty much the same as ramp, but let me just cancel that a second. So we've got this selection here, and let me try grow and shrink. So this should move the selection area out a bit, and you can reduce that selection area that way and make it circular. So that is, let me cancel that, but it's pretty much those options there are fairly similar to what you can get from the refine button. So I think there's only one more option, So you've got edit selection as a layer, and let me come back to this here, and obviously we had this as a layer, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and what I'm looking for, selection from layer. So that is going to select that girl layer there. Let me turn that off and turn back on the original one, and I will use this edit selection as layer, and this is got pretty much similar to option to if I'd just done refine, and that it will has put the red area around the outside. And I'm guessing if I add what should we try? Let's turn it black and white. Oh, it's very hard to say because it's got a white background. Not a great choice on my part. Let's try a different one. Let's just try levels. It's the easiest one to go with. And yeah, whatever alterations I make, it is only affecting the area that was selected from the edit selection as a layer. So basically all that has done is sort of added the layer mask options to the whatever adjustment I added. So I press Ctrl and D. So that is, I think, the last option, and that finishes our look at the selection menu and sort of basically the looking at how and why you might want to make a selection. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.